The most powerful man in that hotel couldn't order a glass of water, and not one single person on staff could help him. Picture this, a five-star hotel, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, staff trained for years on hospitality, etiquette, wine pairing, everything. And somewhere in the middle of this perfect, polished dining room, a Japanese billionaire sitting completely alone in a crowd of people who had no idea what he was saying. This is a story about a moment that nobody saw coming. A story about a girl who almost didn't even show up to work that day. And what happened next changed both their lives in a way that nobody in that room will ever forget. Kenji Mori was not a man who traveled for fun. At 67 years old, he had built one of the most respected construction companies in all of Japan. He had offices in Tokyo, Osaka, and Singapore. His company had built bridges, airports, and entire city blocks. He was the kind of man that other powerful men stood up for when he walked into a room. But outside of Japan, Kenji had one very real problem. He never learned English. Not because he was arrogant, not because he didn't care, but because his entire life, his entire business, his entire world had been built inside Japan. He had translators for international meetings. He had assistants who handled everything abroad. He never needed to speak English because someone else always spoke it for him. This trip to the United States was supposed to be simple. A quiet dinner before a big business meeting the next morning. His assistant had booked the table. His assistant was supposed to be there, but his assistant missed the flight. So Kenji sat alone at that table. No translator, no phone signal strong enough to reach Tokyo. No one. Inside one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Surrounded by staff who had been trained in French cuisine, Italian wine, and the correct way to fold a napkin. Not a single one of them spoke Japanese. The head waiter tried first. Slow English, loud English, the kind of English people use when they think. Speaking louder somehow makes it easier to understand. Kenji just looked at him, politely, patiently, but completely lost. Another staff member tried pointing at the menu. Kenji nodded, but not because he understood, because he was too polite to make anyone feel embarrassed. The manager came over. He smiled the big professional smile. He gestured. He pointed. He even pulled out his phone and tried a translation app. But the connection was bad and the app kept freezing. After 10 minutes of back and forth, Kenji had a plate of food in front of him that he never actually ordered. He didn't complain. He just sat there quietly, cutting into a steak he didn't want, in a city where nobody could understand him, thousands of miles from home. And that's when Maya walked in. Maya Reeves was 24 years old and she was 40 minutes late. She had called in sick earlier that week and she almost called in again that day. She was tired. She had been studying for a certification exam. She almost texted her manager and said she couldn't make it. But she didn't. She showed up. 40 minutes late, slightly out of breath, still tying her apron as she walked through the staff entrance. Her manager pulled her aside immediately. Told her about the situation at table 7. Told her they had tried everything and the guest was clearly unhappy, even though he was too polite to show it. He asked if anyone had any other ideas. Maya looked across the room at the older man sitting alone, and then she said something that made her manager stare at her. Like she had 3 heads, she said, "Let me try." Here is something most people don't know about Maya. She had spent 2 years in Kyoto, Japan as part of a university exchange program. She studied there, lived there, made friends there. She fell in love with the culture, the food, the language. She wasn't fluent. She would never claim to be fluent. But she had worked hard enough that she could hold a real conversation. She had come back to the United States, taken this waitressing job to pay rent while she figured out her next move, and never once mentioned the Japanese thing to anyone at work. Why would she? It never came up. Until now. She walked over to table 7. She stood beside Kenji Mori, and in quiet, careful Japanese, she introduced herself and asked him how his evening was going. The look on his face. People who were in that dining room that night described it later. They said it was like watching someone who had been underwater for an hour finally break the surface and breathe. His whole body changed. His shoulders came down. His eyes went wide. And then he laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. He told her later that in that moment he felt like he had been found. Maya sat with him between her other tables for the next 2 hours. She helped him reorder. She asked about his preferences, his allergies, what kind of wine he actually liked. She translated the entire menu in real time. She made sure his actual meal was something he genuinely wanted. But they didn't just talk about food. Kenji started. Asking her about Kyoto, she told him about the neighborhood she had lived in. He knew it. He had built a building 3 streets away from her old apartment. They talked about a specific ramen shop that she had gone to every week. He had eaten there too. They laughed about how small the world was. By the end of the night, the manager was standing near the kitchen door watching all of this with his jaw somewhere near the floor. Kenji Mori left that night having had one of the best meals of his entire trip, not because of the food, though the kitchen had put in extra effort once they understood what he actually wanted, but because for the first time since landing in America, he felt like a human being and not a problem to be managed. He left a tip that was 3 times the cost of the meal. But that wasn't the end of it. The next morning, Kenji's business meeting went ahead. And during a break in the meeting, he pulled aside the American partner he was working with and told him what had happened the night before. He told the whole story. He said the girl had made him feel at home in a country that had made him feel invisible. The American partner knew the hotel. He made a call. Within a week, the hotel's management had reached out to Maya directly. They offered her a senior guest relations position, a role that paid twice what she was currently making, specifically to work with international guests who needed language support and cultural understanding. She took it. But there is a bigger point here that gets lost in the feel-good version of this story. There are over 1.5 billion people in the world who speak English as a second language. Research from the Harvard Business Review found that language barriers cost multinational companies billions of dollars every year, not just in lost deals, but in damaged relationships, misunderstandings, and guests or clients who simply never come back. Kenji Mori was a billionaire. He had options. He could leave and eat somewhere else. He could call someone and figure it out eventually. But most people in that situation don't have those options. Tourists, immigrants, international students, elderly travelers, people who just need one person to bridge the gap and make them feel like they belong. Maya didn't change the world that night, but she changed that one man's world completely. And she did it not because of some special talent or incredible gift. She did it because she showed up when she almost didn't, because she said, "Let me try," when everyone else had already given up. Because she had spent time learning something with no idea it would ever matter this much. That's actually how most life-changing moments work. You don't plan them. You don't see them coming. You just show up and you try. And sometimes that's enough to completely change everything. The most powerful man in that hotel couldn't order a glass of water until one girl decided to walk over. Watch the next video. It's already on your screen.